He was surrounded by a group of young people, mocking the red MAGA hat he wore with absolute calm. They pushed him, insulted him, and filmed everything on camera, unaware that this man was a former Special Forces operative who knew exactly how to handle any threat. What happened next taught them a lesson they would never forget. Let's start from the moment they made their first mistake. Daniel Reeves, a solidly built man of about 45 with short cropped graying hair, was dressed in jeans, a plaid shirt, and a red MAGA hat. He strolled leisurely through the city's Independence Day festival, passing colorful booths, a stage with musicians, and crowds of cheerful people. In one hand, he held a cup of fresh lemonade he had just bought from a street vendor. As he approached the food truck area, his attention lingered on a small group of young people, 3 guys and 2 girls. They were sitting on a nearby bench, laughing loudly and exuding an air of mischief. One of the guys, tall and muscular with tattoos on his forearms, spotted Daniel's hat, smirked, and said loudly, "Hey guys, look! Another fan of the Orange Grandpa!" The others started giggling, clearly poking fun at the hat. "Bet he thinks we're heading back to Great America," added one of the girls, a blonde wearing short denim shorts. Noticing their taunts, Daniel chose to ignore them and continued walking. However, the group had no intention of letting him go. They stood up from the bench and began heading toward him, deliberately blocking his path. "Seriously, man, what's up with the hat? You think that's cool?" The tattooed guy jeered, stepping directly in front of Daniel. "It does match your shirt," another girl added sarcastically, barely suppressing her laughter. Daniel stopped, looked the guy straight in the eyes, and said nothing. His calm demeanor only seemed to fuel their enthusiasm. One of the guys, skinny and jittery, stepped forward and pulled out his phone, turning on the camera. "Let's record this. A MAGA hat guy out in the wild, 2024 edition," he joked, pretending to film. The group burst into even louder laughter, cracking jokes about how the video would blow up on TikTok. Daniel remained silent, his expression composed, but his eyes subtly scanned each of them. He noticed that despite their laughter and bravado, a couple of them seemed slightly uneasy. The tattooed guy decided to push further. He stepped closer and jabbed a finger at Daniel's hat. "You know, that thing says a lot about you. Bet you're one of those guys who's always whining about how bad things are, but never does a damn thing about it." Daniel took a step back, still maintaining his composure. He pulled out his phone, turned on the camera, and said calmly, "Fine. Since you like recording people, I'll do the same. You never know when this might come in handy." This unexpected move unsettled them. The blonde in the shorts tugged at the tattooed guy's sleeve. "Hey, leave him alone. This isn't funny anymore." But the tattooed guy just smirked and said, "Let him record. No big deal. We're just joking, right?" He clapped Daniel on the shoulder, harder than necessary. "Joking?" Daniel finally replied, putting his phone back in his pocket. "Then I feel sorry for your sense of humor. It's stuck somewhere in high school." By now, people nearby were starting to notice the commotion. A few stopped to watch, curious about what was going on. The young group began to realize they were drawing attention, not just to their jokes, but also to themselves. "All right, let's get out of here. This is boring," muttered one of the guys, but the tattooed one wasn't ready to back down, clearly enjoying the attention. "You're awfully confident, old man," he said with a mocking grin. Daniel leaned in slightly closer and responded with a cold, steady smile. "Confidence comes with experience, and I have plenty." With that, he turned and walked toward the nearest food truck, leaving the group momentarily stunned. A few of them exchanged uncertain glances, but the tattooed guy looked like he wasn't done yet. The situation wasn't over, but Daniel knew this was just the first act. Daniel stood calmly at the food truck, waiting for his order: a burger and a bottle of water. The crowd around him buzzed with conversation and laughter, but he could feel the young group still watching him. The tattooed guy was saying something to the others, provoking another burst of laughter. It was clear they weren't planning to leave him alone. When his order was ready, Daniel approached the counter to grab it. But the blonde girl snatched the burger first. Holding it out with a mocking smile, she said, "Here you go, sir. Enjoy. Maybe you'd like some extra ketchup? Her voice dripped with sarcasm. People nearby were beginning to notice. A few paused, watching the odd scene unfold. Daniel looked at her with a faint smile and replied calmly, "Thanks for your concern. It seems like you enjoy serving others." Her face briefly flickered with confusion, but she quickly recovered, putting her smug expression back on. The tattooed guy stepped closer, folding his arms across his chest. "You're taking this awfully well, old man. It's getting boring. Maybe you should say something clever." Daniel glanced at him, then at the rest of the group, before replying, "I could say something, but I think your actions speak louder than my words." The group laughed even harder at this, clearly feeling emboldened. Another guy, thin and bearded, chimed in. "Look at this philosopher. I wonder what you'd do if we just took your burger." Before Daniel could respond, the tattooed guy grabbed his water bottle and took a swig. "Ah, much better now, right?" he said with a smirk. A few bystanders started murmuring amongst themselves, some pulling out phones to record the growing tension. Daniel stood still, showing no anger, only quiet resolve. His calmness began to irritate them. "What? Nothing? You're not even gonna react?" the tall guy shouted, tossing the empty bottle into a trash can. "I am reacting," Daniel replied evenly. "I'm remembering. Every face, every move. It might come in handy." That statement made the group pause briefly. One of the guys muttered something to the blonde girl, but the tattooed guy wasn't ready to stop. He moved even closer, his face just inches from Daniel's. "What are you gonna do? Tell your MAGA buddies? Cry on some forum?" he sneered, shoving Daniel with his shoulder. Daniel staggered slightly, but quickly straightened up. Locking eyes with the guy, his calm demeanor shifted to something colder and more intimidating. "No," he said quietly. "I'll just give you the chance to walk away while you still can." The tall guy laughed, turning to his friends, but then noticed that several people in the crowd were filming. The blonde girl seemed to realize things were spiraling out of control. "Maybe we should stop. This isn't funny anymore," she said, tugging at his arm. But the tattooed guy shrugged her off, turning back to Daniel. "You think you can tell us what to do? We see guys like you every day." "Maybe," Daniel replied, his gaze steady. "But guys like me, you won't recognize them until it's too late." The crowd around them grew louder with murmurs, and more people gathered to see what was happening. Sensing the pressure, the tattooed guy decided to end it with a dramatic gesture. He shoved Daniel again, this time harder, forcing him to step back. "Go home, old man. Your time's over." Daniel raised his hands, signaling he wasn't looking for a fight. He looked at the guy one last time and said calmly, "You just made a big mistake." His words were so assured that even the tattooed guy hesitated for a moment. But he wasn't ready to back down. The tension was at its peak, and no one knew how quickly everything was about to change. The crowd had grown thicker, with people holding up their phones to record the scene. The tall guy, feeling the pressure of the audience, decided to go all in to humiliate Daniel. He smirked and said loudly, "Well, old man, what are you gonna do now? Call your MAGA crew, or just run home and cry about it?" Daniel looked at him with an unflinching expression and calmly pulled a leather wallet from his pocket. For a moment, everyone thought he was about to offer money to end the conflict, but instead, he pulled out an ID. "If you're so curious about who I am, allow me to introduce myself," he said, his voice calm but steely. He unfolded the ID for everyone to see. It read, "Major Daniel Reeves, Special Operations, Retired," alongside a small golden medal engraved with the words, "For Valor." The crowd fell silent. The tall guy, who had been so confident moments ago, unconsciously took a step back. His bravado began to falter, but he tried to maintain his composure. "So what? You've got a fancy card. Big deal. You think we're supposed to be scared of you?" he said, though his voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. Daniel tucked the ID back into his pocket and stepped closer, locking eyes with the tall guy. "No, you shouldn't be afraid of me. You should be afraid of your choices. Everything you've done here is recorded." He gestured toward the phones in the crowd. "Now tell me, do you really want this video to hit the internet? Do you want your parents, your friends, or maybe your boss to see how you've been harassing a veteran who served so you could enjoy the freedom to act like this?" His words struck the guy like a blow. The blonde girl in the denim shorts grabbed his arm and said in a much softer tone, "Stop! Let's just stop! This has gone way too far." The crowd began murmuring louder. Someone said, "He's a veteran. That guy needs to back off." Daniel turned to the rest of the group, his voice still calm but carrying the authority of someone used to commanding. "And what about you? Do you think your behavior is acceptable? Do you think it's okay to harass someone over a hat? Or do you just believe you can do whatever you want?" The group hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. One of the guys, the one holding his phone, lowered it and stammered, We were just joking. We didn't know you were—" He trailed off under Daniel's piercing gaze. "You didn't know?" Daniel repeated. "That's the problem. You don't think about the consequences of your actions. You only see what you want to see and judge people based on appearances." The tall guy, still trying to hold on to some shred of confidence, said loudly, "Come on, don't make such a big deal out of it. Everyone makes mistakes." Daniel nodded. "True, people make mistakes, but mistakes have consequences." He looked around at the crowd. "And I think today's events will leave you all with something to think about." He turned back to the tall guy and added, "But remember this, I could have done a lot worse to you. You pushed me, humiliated me in public, and now you're trying to walk away as if nothing happened. But I won't stoop to your level." His words hit like a lightning strike. The tall guy finally realized he had lost control of the situation. The blonde girl tugged at his sleeve, urging him to leave. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring about what they had just witnessed. A man approached Daniel and said, "Thank you for your service, sir. People need to learn to respect those like you." Daniel nodded, his face calm, though he felt the lesson had been delivered. But he wasn't done. While the confrontation might have ended without consequences for the group, Daniel decided there was more to do. As the crowd began to thin, the tall guy tried to save face. He turned to his friends and said loudly, "Let's get out of here. Nothing to see here. That old man just wanted attention." But his voice no longer carried the same confidence. He cast a glance back at Daniel, who stood quietly, watching them. The group started to walk away, but at that moment 2 festival security guards arrived, drawn by reports of the commotion. One of them, a tall man holding a radio, asked, "What happened here? We received reports of a disturbance." Before the group could answer, several bystanders began speaking up at once. "These young people were harassing that man over his hat. They pushed him and tried to humiliate him in front of everyone." The guards turned their attention to the tall guy with tattoos, whose defensive tone made it clear he was trying to downplay the situation. "It's just a misunderstanding. We didn't do anything wrong." The guard looked at Daniel, assessing his composed demeanor, and asked, "Sir, would you like to file a report?" Daniel shook his head slightly. "No, thank you. It's not worth the trouble. But I would like to ensure they understand their actions have consequences." He turned to the group. "You want to leave here with a clear conscience, right? Then I suggest you apologize to everyone who witnessed your behavior. Right here, right now." The group froze. The blonde girl, nervously wringing her hands, was the first to speak. "We really didn't mean any harm. We're sorry." The others mumbled half-hearted apologies, but the tall guy hesitated, still reluctant to admit defeat. "Come on, it was just a joke," he muttered. Daniel stepped closer, his voice firm. "A joke ends where someone else's dignity begins. If you can't bring yourself to apologize sincerely, it means you don't even understand what you've done. That's sad." The crowd fell silent, waiting for the guy's response. Under the weight of dozens of eyes, he finally muttered, "Fine. I'm sorry." Daniel nodded slightly, though the security guards remained vigilant. One of them, the senior officer, said, I think it's best if this group leaves the festival grounds. We can escort them out. The tattooed guy protested. Seriously? We didn't even do anything that bad. The guard replied coldly. There's no room for aggressive behavior at this event. Reluctantly, the group followed the guards, casting irritated and embarrassed glances at Daniel. The crowd applauded, and someone shouted, Well said, sir! Thanks for teaching them a lesson! As the crowd dispersed, a man in a business suit approached Daniel. He introduced himself as one of the festival organizers. Major Reeves, I want to personally apologize for what you went through. We'll make sure incidents like this don't happen again. Daniel smiled. Thank you, but there's no need to worry. These things happen. What matters is teaching people accountability. He took off his hat to wipe the sweat from his brow before putting it back on. As he headed toward a nearby bench to finish his water, he noticed the blonde girl from the group returning alone. She approached hesitantly and said, I'm sorry for what happened. I didn't think it would go that far. Daniel looked at her calmly and replied, Apology accepted. I hope you'll take this as a chance to learn. She nodded and walked away quickly. Daniel sat down, watching as the festival continued around him. He knew this was a small but meaningful step toward making someone rethink their actions and consider their impact on others.